much, everybody, for joining us. And I see in the chat we have some activations. People from Mexico are here, Texas. I see Chicago. Thank you so much for all of our members joining us today. I am super thrilled for everybody here to join us. We have an amazing guest speaker here, Beatriz, who will be supporting us and walking us through our first day of our Millonaria Mindset series. As we go through here, I really highly encourage all of our attendees to please utilize our Q&A to have questions. I'll be here to support Beatriz throughout the session and moderating those questions as they come filtered through. And then we'll also have a really awesome time where we'll be able to engage with members from the Suma team as well from the lit team through our sessions later on in the afternoon. So please hold all the questions in the chat today here for Beatriz in the chat here in the Q&A. And then when sessions go live, we'll be informing you where to go. But thank you so much for all of our members here today. Beatriz, thank you so much again for joining us this evening as well.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure being with my friends from Latinas in Tech. And obviously, super grateful to Morgan Stanley for always supporting our work. I think this is such an important topic. I'm so excited to see so many jefas from so many places. And I think this is going to be an awesome conversation. And this is just to remind everybody, this is a two-part conversation. Today, we're going to start with the basics of what you need to eventually, become that millonaria or that millonaria in training. And then next week is going to be a great session with my friend Rocio and also someone else from Morgan Stanley talking about investing, which is such an important topic that tends to be a little bit like makes us a little nervous because we didn't grow up knowing how to invest, or that you can start investing with as little as $5, and that, it's all that magic of compound interest is amazing. And you guys will learn all about that next week. But today we have all the basics to get you going on your journey. And we are waiting for our Morgan Stanley representative who will be talking to us about all these things. So hopefully he'll be coming on board. We had a little bit of an issue us getting on the link because I had a link that kept asking me for my credit card. I'm like, I already put in my credit card. So anyway, maybe he's having the same problem. But I said,
No,
just share
definitely.
my link, but hopefully he'll be on soon.
Yes, no, absolutely. And thank you so much again for joining us for this whole seminar. As you mentioned, this is a very weary topic for a lot of women, especially for myself. So to have you here, also to be of support, to share your knowledge, we are greatly, greatly appreciative of that. And yes, we have experienced some difficulties. So please hang on tight to everybody here joining us in. I know there is a little delay too on the front end. But again, with technology, sometimes it doesn't always work the way we want to. So I highly encourage you, as mentioned here in the chat, if you can, just refresh it and you should be able to see it live without a delay.
That's great. No, I mean, I see some people in the house from LA, which is where I am, but also I see people from Oakland, from Orlando, from Houston, Texas. This is so awesome. I love it. Chicago, a few from New York City. Oh, yeah. I see somebody from San Luis Potosí, Mexico. Amazing. More Houston, Austin, Texas is definitely representing here, which is amazing. This is great. I'm always super inspired where I have an opportunity to be with so many amazing Latinas. And it's crazy that we're all from Latinas in tech and we're having some tech issues, but we're going to get through them. It always happens. It always happens. I think it's a different platform than people are used to, right? It's not your classic Zoom.
Yes.
With the more bells and whistles that the tech has or the product has, sometimes it's a little more challenging.
Absolutely.
But hopefully, we have now people from Minneapolis and Seattle. This is amazing. This is great.
And Beatrice, I have a question for you. Just for your perspective, as far as when it comes to being an entrepreneur yourself, and when coming into your journey, what was that experience like early on for you? I know for a lot of women here, a reason why this became appealing to them, as you mentioned earlier, was the fact that it's a very difficult conversation to have as Latinas in general. But you've kind of already set the playing field for your own experience in the industry. But early on, what was that experience like for you? If you don't mind me asking, just kind of advice for any of us Latinas here looking to excel in our financial.
I think I had, the same experience as everybody else who doesn't grow up in a household where we talked about money at the dinner table. Like there was no money conversation in our sobremesa. My parents
Yes.
were very charitable people who ran a nonprofit for our family. So we always talked about giving back, which is amazing. We always talked about, what can we do for others, how we should give as much as we possibly could, but we never talked about wealth building. And I love and I'm super proud of the fact that when my dad passed away, he left every single cent he made throughout his career as a pretty uh, successful attorney to his foundation, to the family foundation. But I think back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, if my dad started to invest that money early on, that
Mm-hmm.
money could have been 100x of what it is today that he left in an endowment, right? So
Yes.
even though you're like, okay, I'm still gonna give it to charity and do whatever, it's good to know how to build wealth, even if you're gonna give it away, even if you're gonna say this is all for charity or for others, but that is your choice. But it is our right to know how to build that wealth. And I think that we need to really change that conversation since we're really, really young. That's why, at Suma, which is my latest startup, we really focus on Latino youth. We want to make sure that before they go to college and before they start getting into terrible debt, not really understanding what credit card debt is or interest
Yes.
rates or things like that, that they really understand that it is important to have debt actually, right? Because that's how you build your credit, but you need to
Yes.
know exactly how to manage it. Some Latinas say, listen, my parents told me never be in debt, like always pay cash, never be in debt. And now that I want to buy a home, I have no credit. So
Yes.
as we know, all the extremes are not good. So having no debt or having too much debt out of control, that is not good. Debt either is not good. But something where you use debt as a strategy, that's really, really good. I have friends who tell me, oh, I started to build my son's credit when he was 8. And I was like, what? That is crazy. And the fact
Yes.
that there's hacks and there's techniques to do that, to start building that credit for your kids when they're really, really young, is amazing and obviously an incredible gift. But yeah, there's so much that we need to learn. And as we all know, information is power. And so
Yes.
hopefully in this hour, you guys will get a lot of that power. And definitely next week, don't miss the investing session, which there's so many things that we think, oh, tengo que ser millonaria. I have to be
Sí.
rich to invest. That's not true. Like you can start investing with $5, right? And
Yes.
that's something that we never knew before. Well, actually, before you couldn't. Now there's a lot of more democratization around how much you can invest and who can invest that we didn't
Yes.
have 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yes. No, I 100% agree. And I'm really happy to see that Ramiro's here. So I'm going to bring him on stage. But I do want to add
Amazing.
to, hi, Ramiro. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the patience.
Yeah, absolutely. I
You
think the mirror
made
is
it.
a good spot. Um, but at least we mentioned some really awesome tidbits, and I hope the ladies in the chat got a sense of that too. But to wrap up to your point, Beatriz, it's a conversation that oftentimes is not had in the family household, and oftentimes, the breadwinners are our parents who unfortunately pass on. But to have these open talks like this, where we are building awareness and sharing knowledge, is when we begin to break those barriers, right? So, and we have the expert here today, Ramiro, who will be helping us through all this information as well. So I'm really grateful. But I don't want to take too much time, so I'm gonna leave you both here to take it away for the both of us.
And then Juanita, one last thing.
Yeah.
Since it's for almost 4:50 now, so we're starting a little bit delayed. Am I still? Should I go till 4:45? This is Pacific time.
Yes.
And then leave the 15 minutes for Q&A and then the breakout rooms. Correct. So
Yes.
that's gonna stay the same. So we'll have a half an hour conversation. Then we'll leave time for questions and then breakout rooms. That's still the flow.
Absolutely. See.
Perfect.
Thank you so
Excellent.
much.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And Ramiro, welcome. Bienvenido. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to get your incredible knowledge in this session. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me on. My name is Ramiro Ramirez. So, just a little background about myself. I'm a first generation Mexican American, born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. You guys touched about this earlier in the conversation, but for all of us that are Hispanics, we know that money isn't a table topic, right? Our parents, our family members, they talk about everything else but money, and that's the experience that I had growing up. Fast forward to 2008, my family was impacted pretty greatly by the financial crisis. And, I was young, hiding around the corner, listening to the conversation that my parents were having about, hey, what are we going to do next? What could we have done differently? And ever since then, I went on this mission to, grow myself to be financially literate, right? I wanted to be in a position where I could help my family members out, talking to them about budgeting, talking to them about investing. And then eventually that passion grew, and I was able to deliver that advice to clients here at Morgan Stanley, right? So, as far as my work history goes, I've been in the financial services industry 10 years now. I started in the banking space, started as a teller straight out of high school. So that's really where I got my foot in the door, really interacting with clients, doing things as simple as, making deposits, making withdrawals, cashing checks, and so on. Eventually, I wanted to take the next step up and help clients at a deeper level. So I became a personal and a business banker, right? So I work with the everyday client, setting up bank accounts, talking to them about building credit. Spent a couple years at the bank. There's only so much to learn about checking accounts and credit card. I always like to joke and say. So I figured it was time to take the next step in the financial services world, which was the wealth management side of things, right? I wanted to have a little bit more of an impact as far as my clients' lives go. So came over to Morgan Stanley back in 2018 as a financial advisor. Spent quite some time in that role. And really, I mean, I work with clients in all walks of life. I've talked to clients that are, 20 years old and they're just starting their career. They barely got a budget figured out. They're starting their first investment account. I've also talked to clients that are 15, 20 years deep into retirement, right? They all have different goals, different priorities. And, really what was amazing about these interactions is they walked away with something, right? Nothing was better than hearing a client say, hey, you made an impact today. And that's why I've stayed in this industry for so long. And here I am.
Amazing. Well, we're lucky to have you this afternoon or night for people in the East Coast. We jumped in earlier before you joined us just to talk about how we grew up or not having these money conversations, and where the opportunities are now for our generation, for younger generations as well. So I even forgot to introduce myself. So I'm going to go very quickly with a 1 second introduction, and then we're going to jump right in. But my name is Beatriz Acevedo. I am the CEO and co-founder of a fintech company called Suma Wealth that leans hard into culture, into our Latino culture, to make finance super easy and very relatable. And we are super excited to be having this conversation with all of you, as Morgan Stanley has been a supporter of our company since literally the day that we launched with a conversation for Latina Equal Pay Day on how to be better at doing our salary negotiations. So super grateful always for the support of Morgan Stanley. So let's jump right in, Ramiro. Let's start with the basics. Because we can't be financially successful, if we don't have the round foundation, as we know. We all know the right answer to this, but colchon or savings account? And can you really reach millonaria status by only saving in a bank account? I guess, like everything in life, we have options, and not all savings accounts are the same. So what kind of savings account would you need to get your biggest return?
Yeah, absolutely. The conchon is not the way to go, I'll tell you that. But I think it's
Cross
first
it off.
important take it off the list, take it out of
Yes.
the shoebox. Only the zapatos
Yeah.
go in
Or
there.
the
So
Cafe Bustelo cup that always, we see our abuelitas do that as well.
yeah, we get creative with it. But I think first it's important to clarify the difference between saving and investing, right?
Yes.
When we're talking about financial success, those two need to be broken up, right? Savings is really going to be meant for those short-term goals that you're looking to accomplish, right? I say realistically, if you plan to use the money within the next 12 months, that should be put towards savings or a savings account, right? The reason being is because you have plans for that money and you don't want that to go down potentially, right? Usually, most savings accounts out there, they're going to offer some protection. You'll earn a little bit of pennies on your dollars, but it's going to be there when it comes around, right? I think it's also great to, and I'm sure we'll touch base on this a little bit later, but that's where you keep your emergency fund, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
peace of mind account. We all talk about Abuelita's rainy day fund. That's exactly what that is. It's not a matter of if something's going to happen; it's a matter of when. And having a good savings account could be the difference between that being a minor inconvenience or it being a crisis, right? Now, as we start to think about things that are a little bit more long term, right? Buying a house, saving for retirement, getting a kid through college, right? Those are going to be long term goals. And that's when investing comes into play because putting money into an account is a great step, but it's what that money's going to do for you over the long term, right? We always hear about make your money work for you and don't work for your money.
Mm.
You need both. In order to have money, you need to work for it. But then once you
Sure.
have it, right, then we talk about, hey, what can we invest in? And there's multiple accounts out there, right, that have their purpose. So you have retirement accounts, for example. Those could offer tax benefits such as a tax deduction when you put it in. It grows tax deferred, meaning that you're not getting taxed as the account grows in value. And then once you take it out is when you're taxed, right? We also have some accounts that are for other goals. In this case, a home purchase, right? We're not going to put that in a retirement account because we're going to use that before we're retired. We want to avoid penalties. We want to avoid, big taxes if possible. So there are different account types for different goals that you're looking to accomplish.
Got it. Okay, so just going back to the savings account, so we can move on to retirement because I think there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm sure a ton of questions from people. So you mentioned 12 months, so a year of savings potentially that you might need for a rainy day. A lot of people say at least at a minimum 3 months for an emergency savings. I like to have at least a year, as you mentioned, in my bank account because you never know what could happen. But there's also different types of accounts, right? Like, how do you shop around for the one that gets you the best interest rate? Where do we start, and what should we be looking for if you are going to keep that money for a year in a savings account?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically, the golden rule is to have 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, right? So if you spend $2,000 a month, at minimum have 6,000, at max 12,000, right? Some people, if their situation really varies month to month, their income isn't steady, then maybe it's safer to go a little bit longer term. The thing is if you hold money in a savings account for a full year's worth of expenses, that money's not going to earn much for you, right? And there are some great options out there as far as savings accounts. A good place to start off is going to be with whoever you bank with, right? Whoever has your checking account, they usually offer savings accounts as well. There's also what's known as a high yield savings account, where you
Mhm.
typically get a little bit more bang for your buck as far as the interest that you earn, right? Both are usually pretty accessible. But I'd say usually, a traditional bank savings account or a high yield savings account is the way to go. Starting with your bank is great. I mean, now we're in the day and age where you could do everything online. There's some
Right.
banks online that offer great interest rates as well.
Got it. Okay, so just be vigilant about that. Don't leave too much for too long. That's not working for you. And that's on the savings side. Now let's talk a little bit about retirement. What would you say is the most important thing to know, aside of like max your 401k that people say, and at Suma we say 401k because a lot of people are like, I don't really understand the 401k.
I like that.
But what are the most important things to know? Because we only hear like max it, but then you get these questionnaires from work that are so overwhelming of not knowing, oh my gosh, what do I pick? What do I choose? It's embarrassing for me to tell HR that I don't quite understand this. Like, I'm the boss, I'm the VP, I'm the president, I'm the CEO. How do I not know this? So could you give us some insights on like what to do? And I know in some states in the US now having a 401k plan for employees, even when you have a company of 3 employees, is mandatory, as we are starting to see in California. So we need to get a lot more comfortable, I think, with 401k. So could you give us like what is the most important thing to know and how do we maximize this?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think, first, it's important to sit down with a financial professional to talk about what your goals are, right? Um, I think a 401k is a great place to start, right? It's offered by your employee. Oftentimes, they're giving you a dollar for dollar matching contribution, right? If you put in $500 a month, they're also going to put in $500 a month. Um, we love free, especially when it comes down to money. So that's a great place to start. Everyone should be at least making the contribution that their employer matches. If not,
Matches.
you're simply just leaving money on the table, right?
Sure. Yeah, because it's
There's
free
two.
money, really, right?
Exactly. Yeah, matching contributions are completely free money, so let's take advantage of it. There's two ways that you could invest within a 401k usually, right? There's a traditional or a pre-tax option, and there's also a Roth or an after-tax option, right? And really choosing between the two is going to depend on your tax situation. So just to give you a little breakdown as far as how those work is usually with a pre-tax or a traditional 401k, any money that you put into that account is not taxed, right? So we get the immediate tax savings like I talked about before. Any growth that the account has is tax free. It's not up until you actually take the money out that you're taxed on it, right?
Right.
So if we're talking about 10, 15, 20, 30 plus years of saving this account growing, that could amount to a lot of tax savings. And then the other option would be a Roth account, right? Or an after tax contribution. When you put money into that account, you are taxed on it. But the
Right.
biggest benefit is that it grows tax free and you're
Right.
not taxed on that money when it comes out.
So, which one do you like best, or does it really depend on each person's situation? I guess if you need the maybe the write off now, or maybe if you, some people say, I don't have the money, like I need 100% of my paycheck. So then maybe you're better off doing it pre tax because I guess you're going to pay that in taxes regardless, and then just once you pull it out, you pay the taxes. Or do you have sort of like a guide that you're like, listen, a good rule of thumb would be choose this one if this is happening to you or this other thing? Like, how would you pick that strategy?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone's situation is going to be slightly different, right? Usually, a good general rule of thumb is: do you think your taxes are higher now that you're contributing to it, or are your taxes going to be higher once you're taking the money out?
Right.
Right? So if your income is pretty high, you're getting taxed at a pretty high tax bracket, then it may make sense to do pre-tax to save that money now. But if you're in a lower tax bracket now, compared to when you're retired, then it makes sense to go through and do the after-tax contributions.
Got it. That makes sense. Can you talk to us a little bit about Social Security and how to make it work better for us? I mean, there's so much talk about Social Security, and we hear like, oh, it's going to run out. Oh, there's not going to be enough. Like, I mean, what's true? What's not? What should we be paying attention? Um, in your experience, can you give us a little more insights on that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So some people like to joke and say social insecurity because we don't know what's going to happen,
That's
right?
horrible.
But I mean, it's definitely a great way to supplement some income in retirement. Usually, you have to wait up until you're age 67 to fully maximize your benefit. You could take it a little bit sooner, but they start deducting the amount that they'll give you, right? I think, through my conversations with clients, they were relying on Social Security too heavily, right? They
Hmm.
underestimated the amount that they're going to need in retirement. and overestimated the amount of Social Security that they were going to get. A lot of those things are unfortunately are out of our control, right? What the future looks like. So, do what you can to take control of your situation, which is really going to go back to making sure that you're investing and you're setting money aside so you don't have to necessarily rely on that. And hey, if the time comes, we're eligible for it, we get an extra $2,000 a month, then that's just going to be icing on the cake.
Right, right. Okay, that's good to know. But yes, don't rely only on that. I guess that's pretty clear to everybody. And I guess, the session on investing is going to be next week. But definitely, the earlier that you start, the better. And there's so much upside to that, to really not have to depend on just Social Security when you get to that age where you want to hopefully enjoy everything that you've worked for. Let's talk a little bit about debt, because sometimes debt sounds like a dirty word. People are very concerned in our community with debt, or at least some people that say, listen, my parents, taught me that no matter what, I should not have debt. I should pay everything in cash. And then there comes a point in their lives where they're like, oh my gosh, now I can't afford to buy a home. I mean, I can afford to buy a home, but I don't have credit. So nobody's giving me the credit to buy a home. So, we know that more than 80% of Americans hold some sort of debt. But I don't think we can address like wealth building without discussing the benefits of paying off debt on one side, but also understanding the advantages on knowing how to manage your debt so you can sort of use it in your advantage to start building credit. Can you give us your insights on that? Like how much debt is too much debt and how much debt is good debt to build your credit?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, debt can definitely be a double-edged sword, right? It could be used for a lot of good and open up doors for you. But if you're not responsible, you fall into these debt traps that are out there, then you could really end up hurting yourself in the long run. The reality is that we're going to need good credit, right? And in order to have good credit, we need to be able to manage our debt well. So, I think a good starting point for anyone that's looking to establish credit is start with a credit card, right? I think a credit card is a good way. Different credit cards will have different requirements. For people that maybe already have had a rough time with credit, there's ways that you could rebuild credit through a secured credit card. So I'll plug that in real quick, talk to your financial institution about that. Um, but the thing is once we have that tool, is what are we doing with it, right? I think when it comes down to building credit and avoiding debt, it really comes down to managing your expenses, right?
Right.
So if we get the credit card, we're out there shopping every weekend, we're buying TVs, new shoes, new purses, whatever it may be, that debt's going to add up, and eventually you're going to start feeling the pain of, hey, now a lot of my money is going to paying off the debt, right? I'm feeling that stress. I see the interest accumulating over time. But if we're responsible with our spending, hey, maybe you're putting groceries on there, or maybe, you're putting gas on the credit card and you're paying that off every month. That's a great way to build credit. And I'd say really the key is to avoid that high interest debt, right? Usually it's going to be credit cards. I think now they're probably anywhere between 20 and 25%, which is insane.
Crazy,
Um,
crazy.
that that's money that's coming out of your pocket, right? So making sure we're avoiding high interest credit card debt. Personal loans also tend to have high interest rates associated with them, but there are some debts that are more manageable, right? Such as car loans, right? Car loans are a great way to build credit. Again, as long as we're not buying $1,000 car that we can't afford, or having $1,000 monthly car payment we can't afford. It's going to be hard to come up with $500,000 to buy a house. You're most likely going to need a mortgage, right? So, again, it's all about using the tool for you and making sure it doesn't turn against you.
Yeah, I think all that is good, kind of obvious, right? Obviously, I think for everybody on the call, but as I do more work at Suma, I've learned so many things that I had no idea. So for me, it wasn't about, oh, I need a credit card to build credit or I can't afford my car payment, but it was things like, oh, I don't need I'm going to update to a platinum card. I now don't need my gold or my green card. I'm going to cancel them. Like, this is just a dumb example, but I never knew that that affected my credit. I would just think to have too many credit cards open would affect my credit. But, things like that we don't know, or how much of your credit you use. I used to think, oh, I'm going to max my Amex. I have the money in the bank to pay it, but I want to get the miles. And then it's like, oh no, like that credit utilization ratio is something that's going to affect your credit if ideally just use under 30%. I'm like, oh, nobody told me that, or nobody told me to not cancel my credit cards. Even if I just leave them in my drawer in zero, it's better because the length of your credit history counts in your credit mix. Like, I think those are the less obvious things. I think obviously knowing that you have to pay off your credit cards and you shouldn't be charging stuff you can't afford is everybody knows. But what are other things that we're not thinking about that could be good insights for people listening here?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on a couple of them, right? So, number one, credit history is really important when it comes down to your credit score. So, in my case, for example, I still have the credit card that I opened when I was 18 years old. I think there's like a $500 limit or something like that on it. But, through some research, I found out that if I were to go through, close that credit card out, I lose all that history that I have with the
Right.
company, right? And it's all gone. So all those
I don't
years
think
that you
people know
spent,
that,
yeah, yeah. Um, so even if you're not gonna use it, like you mentioned, keep it in a drawer, lock it up. That credit history is probably worth a lot more than the credit card itself. So that's something definitely to keep top of mind. Credit utilization is also a big one, right? Out of all the available credit that you have, how much are you using it? From a credit score standpoint, the more you use, the riskier you are to lenders, right?
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm.
as a general rule of thumb, you want to keep that utilization under 30%.
Right. Yeah. Any other things? I mean, how about like soft and hard credit inquiry? We try to explain that at Suma with two different tortillas or tacos, one soft, one hard, and we're like, listen, the hard's the one that can chip your tooth, and that is not good. And that's when people inquire. If you're inquiring, you have to be careful to know, is this soft or is this hard? Because the hard, when they're you're sort of trying to when they want to lure you like to open a credit card or something like this, and people pull from your credit, that's going to hurt you. But sometimes it doesn't, so you have to understand the difference between those two, so that can affect your credit as well, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So a hard credit pull is usually when you're applying for credit, right? That could be a
Right.
credit card, a personal loan, a mortgage. But there are also times where a soft credit pull may come into place. That could be things such as, applying for a new apartment, right? They want to make sure that you have a history of making on-time payments, so they will use a soft credit pull. The hard credit pull will have an impact to your credit score. So you could expect that it's going to go down by a couple points, especially if you're out there shopping around for different credit cards, different auto loans, right? The more inquiries you have, the more it could impact your score. But usually with soft credit pulls, there isn't any impact. They're really just taking a look to make sure that there's not anything too large on your credit report, like bankruptcies, recent defaults, and so on.
Got it. Okay. So, yeah. So just be super, super mindful of like, what are the things that are not the obvious as far as like, of course, pay your credit card on time. But these other things that I don't know, I had no clue till I started working in this company and we made a whole series of videos of like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that this happened. So again, like all this information is definitely power and it's super important. I have a question for you, Ramiro, that we were talking a little bit about before you joined. And I have a friend who works at a financial institution. She's telling me I started building my kids' credit when they were like, in the first year of elementary school. How early can you start build, and how do you build credit for someone else? So we now have learned a few steps on how you build and keep credit for yourself. But like if you're a mom or if you're a tia, what or tío, of course, what are those steps? Like how would you go about building credit for a minor in your family?
Yeah, that's a new one. I'm not sure if I've ever heard anyone do that for a minor. Usually, the best way to go about it is wait up until that they're 18, right? They're individuals or grown-ups kind of. There's a couple ways that you could help them through the process then, right? So one good option is that you could add them as an authorized user or a co-user on your existing credit card. Now, be careful with that, right? You're still going to be on the hook for any expenses that come on, but maybe, they don't have a ton of work history to or income to get them qualified for their own credit card. So you could help them out, right? It's kind of like a cosigner with an auto loan. For people that are in college, there's college credit cards available out there as well. Those usually have lower income requirements and it's easier to get approved. And then the last one would be that secured credit card that I'm talking to you about. So
Yeah.
usually the way that that works is that you're able to put a certain amount of money down, right? It's kind of like a security deposit. You say, hey, I want to give you $500. Give me a credit card for $500. If for whatever reason you don't pay it, the bank has that $500 to recoup their losses. But that's a good way to start building credit. And then eventually, as you show good credit history of on time payments, keeping your balance low, they give you that money back, and then you eventually graduate to a regular one.
Yeah, I think that's what she was doing. And like for everybody on the call, like if you think about maybe you were going to give your kid or your sobrinito or sobrinita a gift card, instead of doing that, you do the secure card. You're still putting the money down, and you're able to like support them in that credit building journey as they start to graduate. I would say that once they're adults and they're 18 and in college, they have enough credit that they can get their own credit card, because I would be more nervous to give my kid a extension of my credit card at that age than we're minors, and you sort of can control what's happening in that credit card. But of course, everybody's different. Everybody's different. We had only have a few more minutes. I wanted to get through a couple other points that are not super obvious, that I think are super critical for people here wanting to build wealth. And one is debt to income ratio, right? Like we tend to not know a lot about that. So I'd love for you to, explain to everybody what it is and why it's important. And then we can hopefully close it out with talking about net worth. And again, why that is important and why you should care. In the topic of this conversation is how to build wealth, how to have a millonaria mindset, what are those building blocks. So I think both of those concepts are super important. And any recommendations that you have to be in one, you want to be lower, and in one you want to be higher and stronger. But can you share a little bit about your insights on both debt to income ratio and net worth?
Yeah, absolutely. So debt to income ratio is really going to measure the amount of debt obligations that you have on a monthly basis compared to your overall income, right? So just to throw an example out there, make the math easy. Let's say you make $1,000, and between your credit cards, your personal loan, you have $500 worth of payments. That's going to be a 50% debt to income ratio, right? And like you mentioned, Beatriz, the goal with this one is to have it low as possible, right? The lower the percentage, the better. And
Right.
this really comes into play when we talk about applying for credit, right? The whole point of credit and credit scores is for the people that are lending you money to assess the ability for you to pay them back, right?
Right.
So the lower that percentage is, the higher the chance that you're going to be able to pay those obligations.
Great. And then let's talk about net worth, because we hear a lot, and I know you guys. So as a building block, because I know next week you guys are having a conversation regarding investing, and it used to be that to be an accredited investor, you need to have a net worth of X, right? It used to be like $1 million, and not counting your main primary home. So how do you calculate net worth? Why is it important, as we think about building wealth?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a pretty simple formula. So it's going to be your assets, right? So everything that you own that has value. So this could be your retirement accounts, your checking accounts, your savings accounts, your jewelry, right? Anything that you could sell for a value is going to be under the assets category, right? Then what we do is we go through and subtract all your liabilities. This is going to be the money that you owe, right? So it's going to be your mortgage balance, again, the loan that you have on your car, your credit card balance. So once you take the assets, subtract the liabilities, you come out with the net worth number.
Right. Okay. So yeah, so we have a fun video where we visualize like an avocado, and it's like you take out the pit, those are the liabilities, and then what's left, which is all the yummy pulp of the avocado, that's your net worth. But it is so critically important to even don't confuse it. Some people say, "Oh, my house is now worth, whatever, $3 million, and I only paid for it 1 million." It's like, but you then have taken out a few lines of credit, so you have to deduct all of that. So for it to count as true net worth, as you were saying, you really need to be careful about what any payments that is due on that, whether it's a car or it's a home or any kind of asset, to really know, okay, I am worth this. So it's important that people don't get super excited with just the full value, but you have to be
Mhm.
deducting whatever it is that you owe on it. And I think that's super important to know.
Yeah. I mean, a good way to think about it is if you sold all your assets, so everything you own, you paid back everything that you owe, what do you walk away with,
What's
right?
left?
That's your net
Exactly.
worth.
Exactly. Okay, I know we are a couple minutes over, and I'd love to make sure that we get to answer more than my questions, that I still have plenty, and I could go on for hours here from everybody who has joined us. I confess that I don't know where to go and read the Q&A. I went to private chat and I saw nothing, and I don't know. I know you guys were encouraged to comment in the Q&A. And I don't know where the Q&A is here, where I'm looking at my screen. So I would love some help from the team from Latinas in Tech to know where I can read the questions from everybody who's here. If I don't see anything, I guess I'm going to keep going, if that's okay. But I'll keep an eye on the chat, or I guess on the comments, to see if there's anything there, or on the private chat to see if anything's been curated. But I don't think there is. So, okay, we'll keep going until maybe somebody on the Latinas in Tech side can let us know if they see anything. So let's go back to net worth, because I think it's important for the conversation that you guys are going to have next week on investing. Why is it that, to be an accredited investor, to be able to invest in certain types of assets, um, not only do you need to have $1 million in assets, but also that you also need to not count your primary home. That just seems like it's a lot, right? Because most of us, one of our biggest assets is our home. So why is it that they're taking off the home and only letting you count everything else, excluding your primary home?
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, once we start having the conversation about accredited investors and their eligibility to buy investments that are outside of the normal, those investments typically have higher risk involved, right? So we want to make
Yes.
sure that anyone that's looking to invest, they first have a good foundation. They're going with more traditional investments, and as their assets grow, they have the wiggle room to take on that additional risk. They could go down that route, right? Um, as far as the primary residence, not counting towards that figure, I think it really is because if it came down to it, your home would be the last thing that you would need to sell or could sell to come up with, X amount of money, right? Usually we're going to liquidate our investment accounts, maybe that rental property. The home is the last one to go. So we don't want to jeopardize and put that at risk. So we're going to
Got
include
it.
everything outside of that.
That makes sense. Okay, I'm getting now the questions from everybody who's joining us. And just as a reminder, you guys will also have the opportunity to go into breakout rooms in 10 more minutes. So you'll be able to ask those questions directly to the advisor that you get assigned. So more awesome investors will be able to answer your questions directly. So I'll get to as many as I can. But then you'll have an opportunity to ask directly in case I don't get to yours. So here's a question. How can I avoid being taxed when I retire on the 401k? I guess we talked a little bit about it, but as a reminder, can you quickly expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no real way to avoid being taxed on the money, right? It's a matter of choosing when you get taxed on it.
When you get
So
taxed.
if you're someone that doesn't want to, pay taxes in retirement, you're going to have to pay the taxes now, right? You pay taxes when you put the money in, the account grows tax free. And then when you take the money out, there's no taxes on it, right? That would really be the only way. But again, there's no true way to avoid taxes. It's a matter of when you want to pay them.
Right, right. Okay, so that's something that's unavoidable. So you got to just pick, is it now that you're paying or is it later? And I guess one of your tips was depending on what tax bracket. I mean, I guess you can't really know about the future, but if you think probably I'm making more money now than when I'm in my 60s or 70s that I decide to retire, then I might just defer that to later because you might be in a lower tax bracket, just as sort of like a guessing strategy, right? But I guess you pick and choose when that is going to happen. Okay, great. Here's a few questions as well. Any tips for tackling debt after having to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy? I'm looking for advanced tips on tackling extreme debt.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess it really depends on the type of bankruptcy that you file, right? There's one form of bankruptcy that eliminates your debts completely, right? Outside of student loans, those are the only ones that can't be bankrupted. But there's also a different type of bankruptcy where you're essentially making an arrangement to pay back the debts, right? So I think it's good idea to know where you stand if you're in that situation, which one you're filing for, because one's going to have continued obligations and the other is not. Now, as far as debt payoff strategies goes, there's a couple ways to go about it, right? We have the snowball method, right, which is really popular by Dave Ramsey. I'm sure everyone that's on this call has probably listened to a few of his podcasts. But with that being said, the snowball method is essentially going to have you list all your debts from smallest to largest, regardless of interest rates, right? And really what you do is, you create your budget, you see how much you could allocate towards the debt payoffs, and you start tackling them again by smallest to largest. And the idea there is that you gain momentum, right? You pay $1,000 credit card off, then you pay the $2,000 one, then you pay off that $5,000 personal loan. So as you're on this debt payoff journey, you're seeing small wins stack up, and it really gives you, the encouragement that you need to move forward, right? The other method would be the avalanche method, which instead of listing the debts by smallest to largest, you're listing them by what has the highest interest rate to what has the lowest interest rate, right? And really the benefit to that one is that you're paying off the higher interest rate debt first. So you're able
Mm-hmm.
to save more money on interest charges over the long run, right?
Right.
And
That makes
both of
that
those
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah, both of those strategies, work. The goal is the same, pay off the debts. It's really how you want to structure it. Some people need those small wins as they're going on this journey. Some people are math nerds and they're like, hey, if I go about it through the avalanche method, I'm gonna save $500 in interest charges. So it really depends on your style.
Understand. Okay. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Here's one that says, I have one federal college loan with $20,000 remaining and much more in another loan, but I now have saved enough to pay this smaller loan off. However, do you recommend I keep some amount of this loan so it doesn't impact my credit score too much, or should I pay off entirely? I mean, does credit score, I don't think if you pay off your credit score impacts, I guess it's but if she pays it off, she will close it out. Does that apply to like federal college loans?
Yeah, so to my understanding, federal loans do not count towards that.
Right,
Usually it's those revolving lines that you want to be on the lookout for, right? So you don't want to
right.
close the credit cards, the line of credits, those ones that have continued use over time and you have that long history. Usually when you pay off an auto loan, a personal loan, student loan, that's not going to have as big as an impact as, closing a credit card or a revolving line.
Okay, so that's great. Here is one final question that we have before we do our breakout rooms with more specific Q&A directly from you guys to the advisors. It says, for those that are under DACA, tips or other immigratory status, I don't know what that means, but how can we get loans easier? In my experience as a tips, I got approved for a home loan, but not car loan because of immigrant status from two credit unions. Advice for these situations for immigrants, please.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So that's definitely a tougher one to answer, right? Usually credits based off of Social Securities. Now with the DACA and the DREAM programs that we have, you're eligible to receive a tax identification number. It really varies. Some institutions do it, some do not. Sometimes they're going to be limited to certain product types. So, not too much guidance I could provide on that one. I'm not as up to date, unfortunately.
Got it. Okay. Well, I don't think we have any more questions on the chat that I see. There is one. It's more of a comment that says that when you, in some places, they'll just close your credit line if you don't use it. Is there a strategy for that not to happen? I know that happened once to my parents. They were so careful to not use it. They had it there for an emergency. Obviously, if they used it, interest would start accumulating. But then one day they just got a letter from the bank saying, "Oh, you haven't used it. It's closed." And they're like mortified because they kind of thought that they had sort of like that lifeline of that line of credit. But because they didn't use it, it got closed down. So, do you recommend that for anybody who has a line of credit, you use a certain amount just to keep it open? And even if you're paying the interest rate?
Yeah, I learned that the hard way as well. That happened to me. So that's why, with that first credit card that I've ever got, occasionally I'll put, a restaurant bill on it. I'll take it out
Right.
to put gas. So it's not something that I use, but I try to use it once a month for something small, something that I know I'm going to pay off come the next statement. That way we keep that activity going and, they don't go through and close it out.
That's great. Okay, so that's a really good tip. So use it, but pay it off. That way you're not incurring in any interest, but you're keeping it open and you're really helping your credit score continue to grow. Well, thank you all so much. This has been amazing. I wish we had more time, but you will have this additional time to ask your own personal Q&A in the breakout rooms. On behalf of obviously Latinas in Tech, who are dear, dear friends that we love to collaborate with. And on behalf of Suma, we really want to thank Morgan Stanley for always supporting our community. And don't forget that next week you will have an amazing session on investing that you won't want to miss to learn about that magic of compound interest, among other things, to make your money grow while you sleep, literally. So thank you all. Again, my name is Beatriz Acevedo, and it's been a real pleasure to chat with you, Ramiro. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So now we'll wait to see how you guys are going to be put into these groups. I don't know if it's just going to happen magically that you'll be in your own groups or somebody will come on soon enough to let us know what will happen. So friends from Latinas in Tech, please let us know what is next. Oh, here's Juanita. Perfect timing. I think you're on mute.
So sorry about that. I was just saying, clarifying that we are now able to join the breakout sessions. So I highly encourage everybody here, if you can, to click on the sessions tab, which you'll see is now currently highlighted in red and it says now. We have 3 sessions available where we'll have people in there answering questions that are continuing conversations we have today. So please feel free to join whichever one you would like. And then we'll also have members from our team here at Lit in the chat in case you're having issues jumping into those breakout sessions. But thank you so much, Amiro, and thank you so much, Beatriz, for helping us today and jumping on answering questions live. And again, this is going to be also pre-recorded as well, so we'll share it afterwards with all of our registrants and attendees.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good one, everyone. Take care.
Thanks for the time. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.